Okay.
Just became vegan.
Yep. All right.
Swear to God, it was just on the side.
You said it's on right now.
You all know that a big part of the National Grange Workers Advocacy is lobbying and representing your interests in Washington, D.C. and state capitals. So you're going to learn some about that today, but we're delighted to have with us today the Mayor of Sparks. Mayor Ed Lawson was officially sworn in as the mayor on September 14, 2020. He had served as mayor pro tem prior to that, and he was re-elected last week, so congratulations.
Thank you. I want to make sure my council's clapping.
He was born in Sunnyside, Washington, and grew up in Las Vegas. He attended Colorado State University in Fort Collins. He was the Vice President of Business Development for Sierra Builders of Nevada, and worked for the Young Electric Sign Company for 15 years. He's active in the Sparks Rotary Club and volunteers a lot of time for the community. Especially, he plays a significant leadership role with the annual Kids Free Fishing Day, which attracts more than 3,000 kids to the Sparks Marina. If you didn't get a chance to see that, it's a beautiful area here. In 2014, he was recognized as a Public Official of the Year by the Builders Association of Northern Nevada. So we're happy to have Mayor Lawson come on speak.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, thank you. And thanks for being in Sparks, and I hope you enjoy your time with us. Well, that's pretty, that's a little scary. We have a great community here. You know, we're Reno and Sparks, and we've been lately working on our name to become Reno Sparks, kind of like Dallas Fort Worth, you know? So you never say Dallas without saying Fort Worth. We want you to start saying Reno and Sparks in the same sentence. So we've grown up. We are no longer a town, we're a city. We're over 108,000 people live with us here in Sparks right now. We have just a beautiful community. This is where you come to raise your children. This is where you are part of what we call a family-oriented community. One of the things we're really proud of is the Sparks Marina. I'm going to talk a little bit about it. But we have 2 all-abilities play parks. In an all-ability play park, it means that if you're disabled, autistic, in a wheelchair, doesn't matter what it is, there's an apparatus that you can play on. So for caregivers, this is a much needed break for them to get the kids out and have some fun. And this one at the marina, we just opened it about 6 weeks ago. And we actually got a complaint at City Hall. Some lady called from the apartments across the street and said, there's too much noise coming from the marina. And I said, what are you talking about? She says, well, those kids are out there laughing and playing and having fun. I said, you know what? I'll take those complaints all day long. You know, that's exactly what we want. So I did a little studying on you guys too, and I was not aware of you before. I told the director there as I went to Colorado State University, so I looked up quickly to see if there's a fraternity at Colorado State University. What I did read, you guys do great work, and as I've talked to your directors here, there's a lot of good things happening in your organization, so thank you for coming here. Let me just tell you a little bit about us. I think I hit most of what I already wanted to say. Let me get to my notes. Oh, our events. So we have downtown here. If you haven't gotten around, please do. If you go just out the front door, which is over there, I think, and that is the Victorian Square is what we call it. One of the things we started about 5 years ago was a revitalization of downtown by putting more apartments and condos down here. So at the end of this, we will have roughly 5,000 people living in a 6 square block area. So that creates its own energy and its own community. And we know that when we get our first grocery store down here, we've made the big time. So because it's a big deal. The Nugget has the Nugget Amphitheater, which is right out here. If you haven't seen it, it's pretty cool. We get some of the best talent from all over the country here. We just had Toby Keith and, I don't know, help me out with some of the artists that have been here recently. Kid Rock, yeah, Kid Rock that was not a family-oriented concert. I didn't know you could use that F word in those many different ways. But that was a good concert. Anyways, and then we have our movie theater down here. We have the Sparks Museum. We're founded as a railroad town. Actually, the name Sparks comes from Governor Sparks, who at the time was working for the railroad and became governor of Nevada. And, you know, typical politician is, no, I don't want you to name a city after me. 30 days after he got in office, he signed Sparks as the name of our city. So that was pretty cool. But you're sitting basically on a marshy area. So the reason why the railroad picked this area is because they wanted too much money in Reno. So they were able to get this land here and fill it in with the railroad tracks and bringing the dirt in to fill this area in. So that's what became Sparks. You can see a lot of remnants of what Sparks is, with obviously the rail yard right out behind me here. And then across the way is Conductor Heights, which is where all the conductors lived. And then all the houses in this downtown area are all railroad employees, which the cool story about that is they were actually in Wadsworth, which is about 20 miles to the east of here. They picked up those houses, put them on the trains, and rolled them here into Sparks and put them down. And that became housing for the rail workers. So we have a great history here. You're in the Nugget, which has a great history. John Asquaga, who started this, it was basically a roadhouse cafe. And John built it into these big twin towers. I bet you also didn't know that actually 2 elephants lived here for many, many decades, Bertha and Angel. And they were part of the showroom down here. They would come on the stage every night. We had some of the great talent come through here that always went through Las Vegas. So John loved bringing the elephants out, and everybody loved to see Bertha. If you're going to go to dinner, you got a great place right here. Anthony's Chop House downstairs, one of some of the best food in the whole city. And I challenge you to go there and have it. And what a wine list too. Last I heard his wine list is somewhere, wine cellar is around $2 million worth of wine in it. So you can get whatever you'd like. And then the oyster bar, you had your lunch today. That was the soup from the oyster bar. That's always good there. And then Rosie's Cafe. Rosie's was named after John Asquaga's wife, and Rose Asquaga. So, you know, we keep some of that tradition here with us. And we talked a little bit about the marina. The marina is kind of interesting in that the marina was an aggregate pit, meaning a big hole that we dug a lot of rocks out of, and then it got abandoned. In 1997, we had a very large flood. As you can see, the Sierra Nevada mountains are right here. We had a snowpack of somewhere around 10 feet up there, and on January 1st, it started raining. And it rained, and it rained, and that snowpack melted. And it flooded Reno and Sparks, and it filled that aggregate pit up to the point where it was encroaching on I-80, so they had to make a stand there. So at the point that happened, we looked at it. The previous mayor drained the water out, looked at it, and it turns out that it was a cleanup spot. The groundwater, there's a tank farm over here. You see all these big white tanks that they were leaking into the groundwater and showing up at this aggregate pit. So with his help and Senator Harry Reid at the time, we got it cleaned up and then made a park out of it. So we took something that was ugly and not very useful and turned it into the gym. There's a 2-mile walking path around it. We have our All Abilities Play Park. We have a dog park. We have a fishing pier. We have boating. we have, again, it's on my list right here. Thanks. Oh, by the way, I should probably introduce the city council. Paul Anderson, I keep looking at him, and Diane Vanderwell, the two of our city council members here in Sparks. Thank you. And Paul reminds me of the Veterans Memorial because we just dedicated that a week ago last Friday. So what this is it's full of symbolism. We have 17 counties in Nevada. There's 17 trees planted around there. There's everyone who has died in a war for the state of Nevada since we became a state, their name is on that. Some 897 names, I believe it is, on the plaque. There's an honor to every branch of the service around there. And in the near future, we'll have a walking history where you can walk around the park and it'll tell you about the history of Nevada and what we did in certain wars. And literally going back to when Lincoln made us a state in 1864. Thank you. I see the nodding heads. My numbers are not always correct, but 1864. The longest telegraph ever in America, as they telegraphed the Constitution of Nevada from here to Washington, D.C., so we could become a state to help win the war, which is pretty interesting history also. Here you are in Victorian Square down here, the movie theater. We have art down here. I implore you to walk around and look at some of the art. The one piece that I love the most that really I think symbolizes Sparks is right in front of the movie theater across the street here is a big giant heart, and it has a family. And it's mom and dad and the two kids, and they're holding the heart up in this sculpture. It's pretty cool. I think it really symbolizes who we are. It's probably one of the most photographed places in Sparks at this point. So we have another issue that, Sparks has a history of turning bad things into good. So, we had some development over here at the Legends Bay, right across the marina there. And they wanted to develop that, so they bought up all that land. Well, that was where we had our baseball fields and stuff for the citizens. So we were able to go out to the northeast, put in a complete baseball fields for kids, football and soccer fields, and then we have 6 softball fields, that regulation softball fields. Those 6 softball fields generate 1,000 teams a year, come here from all over the place, New York to Washington State, come here to play softball tournaments because of our turf. Our turf there's only one other place in America that has it, and it's a place in Oregon. So they come from all over just to play on our fields because they're safe, they're fast, and it's a lot of fun to play there. That 6 softball fields generates around $25 million of regional impact. And 50,000 room nights a year just for softball fields. So it's pretty amazing, taking once again a development and taking it to the new level of what's good for the citizens of Sparks. And our kids enjoy some of the best softball fields in the world and play areas for soccer and baseball. One of the ways that we, as you may know, marijuana is legal now in the state of Nevada. And what we did with our taxes here in Sparks is, because we didn't know what the federal government's going to do, so we're not pledging any money against a bond or anything. So we said, what we're going to do is we're going to spend cash. What's our number one need? Our number one need was to replace those softball fields about every 10 years, and it's at a cost of around $1 million. So what we do is we take $1 million from our marijuana tax and we build a new field. We replace it with new turf, and we call that our Grass for Grass program. So it's a great name, and it makes it a little easier to have kids out there saying, it's paid for by marijuana tax, but it's a good program. And then of course, I don't know if you've been to Lake Tahoe. Lake Tahoe is probably one of the most beautiful places in America. To drive around the lake, it's around 68 miles. That's how big it is if you've not seen it. And it's basically split in half between California and Nevada. The western side being California, eastern side being Nevada. So in Nevada, we have the casinos and that, and then you cross literally the street there, and you're in California, and none of that's legal. So it's fun to be up there and to know when you cross into Nevada and not cross into California. I would highly, if you get a chance, it's only 30 minutes away. That's what another people don't understand, just how close it is. It's 30 minutes from here, so it's a pretty easy drive. So to talk about all of these things that we've done here, the politicians get the credit, and I shouldn't, and we shouldn't get the credit because it's our staff. We have a very, very dedicated staff at the city of Sparks. One of the things when I got elected in 2010 was to say that our new motto is find a way to say yes. So if somebody tells you they want to put a house of ill repute in downtown Sparks, the answer is yes. Now, you're going to have to change some state laws. You're going to have to do all this. We tell them all the hurdles, and then the developer decides that he doesn't want to do the project. So that's an extreme example of saying, we'll say yes, but here's what you have to do to get there. So it's a totally different way of approaching people, because when a developer normally comes, the first thing staff says is, you can't do that. And we do it just the opposite. So I think that's paying off for us, and people want to come here, live here, and build here. CARES Act. They dumped a lot of money all throughout the country. Here in Sparks, we got around $36 million total of CARES Act money. We spent a large portion of that on rent subsidies for our citizens and for our businesses. Our governor was one that chose to shut us down for a long length of time. So people were losing businesses. As it stands, we've still lost around 30% of our small business in the state of Nevada because of that shutdown process. And that's been devastating for everyone. So we supplemented that. But we also took $4 million of it in combination with the city of Reno and Washoe County, and we built what we call the CARES campus. It's a homeless campus where we have 600 beds. And if you're homeless, you have a place to go, stay warm, get a meal, get cleaned up, take care of all that. But what it does for us mostly is because, let me back up and talk about our HOPE team. Homeless Outreach Proactive Engagement. 3 officers, their job is nothing to do except contact homeless people and offer services. So that's what they do. If you don't have a place for them to go because of the Ninth Circuit ruling, Boise v. Wade, that you cannot ask them to leave a public park or a public anything, they're allowed to camp and stay there until you have a room for them to go to. Well, we now have a place for them to go to. So it's helped us tremendously in Sparks. If you look around, you may see a homeless person here and there. They're in one process or the other. They're either in the process of the warning, or they're in the process of getting services, or in the process of moving on. That's how we've kind of dealt with it. It's kind of a different approach. It's new. About maybe 20% of the communities on the West Coast are using it, and it's working for us. It's so much so that the university, the sheriff's department, Carson City, and Douglas County have taken on the same approach to dealing with homeless people. We talked a little earlier at the table is, homeless folks are not people that are, one step away from a paycheck. For the most part, that population is mentally ill. About 90% of them are mentally ill. The drugs and the alcohol are the byproduct of that mental illness. So you guys know as well as we do, we have to do a better job in America treating our mentally ill and mental health care. And as we were talking to in the rural areas, we have the same exact issue, which is your constituents. So we think that that's important, and we think that for the future with our federal government is something that needs to get funded in a big way. So we're one of those places that's growing tremendously. If you're from somewhere else, we were talking a little bit, Emily was talking about how Colorado's growing. Nevada's growing the same way. We're getting a lot of folks that come in from California, and they're able to sell a tract home for $1.5 million, $2.5 million. come here, retire, buy a house, and put the rest in the bank. So we're not getting their brain power. So they're driving our housing market up. Our wages aren't going up. So we've got this huge gap at this point. The average median house in Sparks now is $550,000. That requires an income of $150,000 to $155,000 to buy. Our average median household income is $80,000. We have a huge housing crisis on our hands, and it's something that we're looking in how to fix it, but it's going to be a problem all over the country. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about my growth plans. Nevada is 85% Bureau of Land Management land. So we cannot grow. Do you see the mountains to the east here? The west is obviously U.S. Forest Service. We are surrounded by BLM. We're out of land in the city of Sparks. So that means we have to grow up. When you grow up, you get more expensive and then create more people here in a denser area. So we're going to embrace that density by making this, as I talked about, 5,000 people living in a 6 square block area. We're looking at Audi Boulevard, where our Hispanic population largely is, and densifying that area. And then on our river, where between I-80, which is this highway right here, and the river, there's less than 100 people live there. And we want to take that and turn that into housing so we can take advantage of the river. I mean, every city in America would love to have a river run through it, and ours has tilt-up concrete warehouses on it. So we want to take that back too. In that same process, we need to get some BLM land. So, you know, if you're not from around here, you don't really realize just how much BLM land and how much it restricts the growth of Nevadans. And so I implore you, if you get a chance and somebody asks you your opinion, say, yes, it's okay for them to grow. Let's sell them that land and let them allow them to grow. Otherwise, we're going to become, as I say, we're going to become San Francisco. And we don't need another San Francisco on the West Coast, in my opinion, especially right here in Sparks. Other than that, I'm going to open it up for questions if you have any, but I could probably talk for an hour on Sparks, and I promised that I would limit my comments to 2 hours. Any questions anyone has of me or the city council people? Well, I want to tell you thank you so much, and we have a saying here in Sparks, keep us green, leave money.
Thank you so much.
Well, I've got some good news for my wife. We found out at lunch that Mayor Lawson and my wife was in Colorado State about the same time. So we've got to go dig out rosters and football teams and class rosters and just see where they fit with each other. We were talking, we both love Ram football, but there's been a little love in the last few years. So we're looking for an upgrade on Ram football. It gave us great pleasure to have some topics today that are dear to our heart. Sean and I, a lot of the Grange staff, the Grange Advocacy Organization, the Grange Advocacy Board. Our job is to advocate for the Grange and the Grange policy. And we have several of our Grange board members, Grange members who are Grange Advocacy Board members here today. Roy and Jimmy and Buddy, stand up. And Bill. Then we have outside members. One will be here Thursday to observe how we do it. And so we have some outside board members as well. But this is not just a Grange Advocacy Organization luncheon. In fact, it's a Grange Advocacy Luncheon. And, you know, going back to the founding of the Grange, since 1867, Grange has operated, has lived, and has built its reputation on two pillars. One, community service. Two, public policy. You know, Grangers are really good at community service. They do it well. They do it all the time. It's something they feel committed to do. It's in their blood. They do it very well. Advocacy, not so well. Grangers have a lot of energy. They've got a lot of influence. They've got a lot of power that they're not using. You know, most organizations in the country who are in Washington to influence public policy would give their left arm to have a grassroots membership. Grange has a gold mine that we haven't mined very deeply on in a lot of years. Now, go back several decades, and particularly the early 1900s, and Grange was really good at advocacy. Since World War II, we may not have been all that good. And so we're trying to help reestablish Grange as a powerhouse, as the spokesman for rural and small town America. We're making a lot of progress. But you need to hear from someone besides me about what to do, how to do it, and the benefit we get from it. You know, you don't know when you look at a tiger, you don't know how fierce the fight because of the size. The lady we'll hear from today is not very big, but there's a lot of fight. And that's what you want in advocacy. The issue of advocacy is to make your point, get it across, and make something happen on the other end. Emily Haggstrom is from Denver. She still lives in Denver. She grew up in Denver. She went to school down the road at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas. So she feels very comfortable in this environment, both in the Rocky Mountain, Sierra area, and in the public policy arena. Emily has worked for a whole lot of folks in her life, and I'm surprised at how many pieces of the supply chain that she has really served in, both here and internationally. I won't read all those. You can read your program, and none of them are in there hardly. I mean, that's how long her pedigree is, if you know something about purebred livestock. She's been doing a lot of things for a lot of people in a lot of places. Her latest entree into the advocacy arena is the Consumer Energy Alliance. We are affiliated with that group to some extent in Washington because we both stand for sensible energy policy. As you know, the Grange has a strong policy of we support all forms of energy development. And with fertilizer prices so high that it was difficult to plant this year, with $5 a gallon diesel fuel, that takes 15 gallons an hour to run some of these big tractors, we have a need for sensible energy policy. And, you know, we were talking among Aggies not long ago that, you know, on the farm, if you want to go from horsepower to tractor power, you figure out what it's going to take. And until you get enough tractors to replace those horses, you don't shoot the horses. On the other hand, it seems to us sometimes that that's what we've done in the energy supply business. And this young lady's job is to make people aware of that, present ways to mitigate that, and win on the other end. So I know you'll enjoy Emily Haggstrom, and thank you for being here to speak on our Advocacy Luncheon.
Do the opposite of the mayor. Well, thank you all very much for having me today. I'm very excited to come down and obviously have an experience for me that is advocacy and getting out and talking about the things that are important to the country, important to people within your communities, and likely very important to you all. I come from Consumer Energy Alliance. Thank you for the intro. I'm the Vice President of Communications and Creative Development for Consumer Energy Alliance. So everything you see, all of the big flashy presentations, advertising, and whatnot is all there and managed by my team. But mostly we are there to represent a cross section of the community. So everybody from individuals out in the cities, towns, rural areas, and then also with whether it's an economic development corporation, a chamber of commerce, or your local Rotary. We really represent everybody within a community. If you want to go to the next slide, just a little bit about Consumer Energy Alliances. We really represent all types of energy, and as Burton was saying, we really want to make sure that people understand why all of the above is very critical to what we do as a nation. So you can see here everything from wind and solar, oil and gas, electricity, pipeline infrastructure, you name it. And one of the things that we try and focus on, just like you all, is really focused on the bipartisan nature of energy. As of, I would say, probably the last 5 to 10 years, it has become a political issue, unfortunately, and that's put a lot of people into really painstaking positions, especially consumers. As the mayor was saying, you know, with housing prices as they are, food costs as they are, and median incomes not as high as, you know, these food and energy prices are, it's created a lot of hardship over the last 2 or 3 years. So we go out and we have a lot of conversation with people on the ground about energy justice. For some people, that means putting them into spots where they feel like they're endangered for their health or their safety. For others, it means making sure that they can put food on the table for their family and get the medicines and things that they need to help them through their day-to-day life. So we really try and have that open conversation with politicians on both sides of the aisle to make sure that they really understand the issues that are in their communities as well as in communities across the country. Another thing that we focus on is environmental stewardship. There's a lot of ways to take care and conserve the environment. As you know, members of the agricultural community, I think you understand that there's ways that people in rural areas do as well. So making sure people understand that it's not one way or another, it's not a black or white issue. It is really how conservation efficiency is done within each of those communities and not pitting certain communities against each other for that. Also, the critical importance of the supply chains. One of the things Burton and I were talking about last night is the EU now is deciding whose product they want to take into their areas because how much is emitted during the process of the supply chain. So now we have to worry about those things as we kind of work through how much energy costs, where things are coming from, and what we're using. And last is that we all can do this together through a bipartisan conversation, thoughtful conversation. We can come up with ways that we can have environmentally sustainable energy in our communities. So that's first and foremost who we are. We have 350 member organizations and over 500,000 individual advocates, and they come up a lot in the work that we do, whether it's in communities talking about solar and wind, or whether we're talking about pipeline development. So that's very important to us as we've gone on. So advocacy is something that we lean on almost every single day. Most of you know a lot of advocacy started in the 80s. It happened with healthcare and around the tobacco issues and what people were experiencing. It's now come into sugar, how much sugar can be in sodas, and single-use plastics. And people use this all the time to be able to get their word out. And I'm sure I don't need to tell all of you guys about advocacy, but we've forgotten how important it's become and how much we're inundated by it every single day. You can change that over. One of the things that I just always like to remind groups and organizations is politics, especially nowadays, are getting hyper-local. I mean, the things that are going on in your community, while there's similar things and actions, there's different resources, there's different people, different experiences, and a lot of the legislative community, and I'm sure you all have spoke to many of them, those are policymakers that are ultimately deciding the fate of your communities. And sometimes they don't even know some of the specific issues you all are talking about. Sometimes they're voting in committee, and it's worth having a seat at the table. it's worth letting them know the things that are important to you all. And one of those things is also drumming up the support of the community. And so it doesn't matter how much you lobby somebody, how much you talk to them, how many times you go in, if they don't hear from the constituents within their community, it's just more lobbying money being spent. So one of the things that we are doing heavily at Consumer Energy Alliance when we go out and have those conversations are we are targeting specific communities because they are hyper-local, because those issues are important for them. You can't just go out with a blanket conversation. So whether that means going in, we do hyper-targeted and local media where we will even from a hamlet community where there's 200 people to where you could be in Detroit with 5 million people, but really making sure we understand who they are, what they like in that community, where they've gone to school. We look at the voting population, we look at the average and median income, and we go out and we target them. We can target somebody as close to your driveway. If you walk up with your cell phone to your mailbox in the middle of rural America, we know where you are and we can target your cell phone. This advocacy extends all the way out into large communities. If you're in Detroit Metro and we know that you're there, we are actively looking at you, whether we have voter lists, whether we have your cell phone number. Those are things that we're going out and we're trying to help people understand what they're getting. Those 500,000 plus members that we have, everybody wants to learn about something different. So sometimes it's oil and gas. Sometimes they want to know what wind and solar is coming up in their community. Maybe they want to understand what's happening with electricity. I know you all have spoken a lot about rural broadband and why that's so important to being able to have access. Now, we have organizations, especially electricity and utility organizations, that are now adding those broadbands to towers. Cell phone companies are doing those with towers. You also have wind and solar communities now that are adding different things around that help the community. So a lot of these issues now, if you can see how the convergence of energy policy and rural policy comes together, there's a lot of opportunities. And I think in many cases where people have been a little bit more silent or thought, well, how will this help us in our community? These are really great ways to get involved. And with a lot of the things that you can add on to specific bills, with a lot of things that other legislative members are looking at, you know, this is a very powerful tool to be able to go out and have that conversation. And we know that within communities, there's individuals that have shut down entire projects because they have the dedication and the willpower, and they're just your everyday average Joe out in a community. So if you have this base, as we were talking about earlier, with as many members as there are out there, and there are very important things, these are ways that you can get involved, because for you all, it's not just the people within your community, it's not just your members, right? It's the restaurants and the grocery stores and the truckers and the railroads, and there's a huge supply chain that all depends on it. And unfortunately, there's a lot of advocacy that's happening on the other side. Next, please. Probably one more, sorry, I get going. So one of the things that CEA does is really trying to help amplify those messages and team together. One of the things that we've learned, and what I think people have learned for centuries, is that working together always does a lot than working against each other. And a lot of times the things that we do at Consumer Energy Alliance, talking about energy, again, rural broadband, healthcare, some of the energy issues in terms of affordability, we really try and highlight and focus those within communities. We team up with the people who have experienced it. I live in Denver. I don't necessarily get out into every community across the country as much as I would like, although I travel quite extensively. And so understanding what's going on in those communities and teaming up with our folks on the ground is always a really great opportunity to utilize the people we already have in our existing networks and help you all within your networks to really help people feel motivated and understood and find out what's going on in your communities. One of the things that I would like to ask, and show of hands, is how many of you have heard within the last, I don't know, year or two about whether it's a solar farm in your area, windmills in your area, or pipelines coming into your communities? Right. And I don't know if anybody wants to share or speak out, but what's your experience been on this? Good?
Trash can.
Which one?
I said trash can. We get lots of things, flyers in the mail, people wanting to put solar farms on our property, and we're not wanting to go that way. And if we were, we'd call them rather than them scooping us up. So I've been trashed.
You're right. How about pipelines? Maybe a wind farm? Transmission line? Those are all coming in, right? We have increasing emissions targets from our local, state, and federal governments. That means exponential power that needs to come out, 3 times the amount of electricity that we have. People aren't going to see the telephone wires that are on the sides of the road. They're going to be the massive transmission lines running across America, and most of it through a rural community. So one of the things that we try and talk about is when you're in here, whether it's, I mean, you can see the list, and I could probably go on for another, page and a half of all of the different things that are coming. But it's active and it's coming fast, and there's a rapid deployment of it. So if there are things that are happening within your communities, being able to have those conversations, being able to reach out, being able to express your opinion to your local, whether it's county commissioner, board of supervisors, whether it's local mayors or town councils. And while, again, it's really great and everybody can go out and lobby, communications now is exceeding the amount of money that is going into lobbying. I think the oil and gas community spent close to, I think it was $65 million in lobbying efforts. Renewables weren't far behind them. There was $1 billion just in a Georgia Senate race. There was $1 billion spent between 10 races in 2020 for Senate. And most of that was spent on communications. It's getting into your phone, it's getting onto your email, it's getting into your door, sending you mailers, flyers, becoming your favorite trash can, right? And it feels like you can never get away with it. But these are the tactics people are using, and they will continue to use, and it is bombarding communities. So how do you take not only the legislative actions you guys are, but how do you combine it into advocacy? From the energy perspective, and a lot of the things that happen in energy really do affect rural and small town communities, you can see where a lot of the money and outpouring is going into these communities. This is just energy. The dark critical areas on here is where we see more than $15 million in spending going to influence people and spend on advocacy. They're targeting local officials, state AGs, going into places and legislatures and starting to write their bills. Who is going to be there for you all outside of the work that you do to go out and help spread your word and spread your voice? You can go to the next one. One of the big things that's happening on the other side, and you'll see, and we don't even, if you're not on social media, a lot of these campaigns are done, they're called Twitter bombs. Now this was used heavily during COVID, but that's going in and having a blog or a post or something, and at the bottom of it, it says text or tweet your senator, tweet your local official. And all somebody's doing is reading and reposting. But if you can send that in your Sierra Club to 2 million of your members, and at least 5 to 10% sends it out as a local official who maybe only gets outreach from their community, 100 or so folks writing into their office or calling, this seems extreme. And to them, they don't realize it's just 200 people. It feels like the world's caving in on them. And these are the people who feel very pressured by this. These are short-term officials. These are people who, you know, maybe don't have the experience, or maybe they're looking to get reelected. And all of a sudden that pressure comes hard, and we call this Twitter legislation. And this happens a lot. You get people who don't normally get together, but they find each other and band together on change.org or a local platform on Facebook or Nextdoor in their community. And maybe they don't have anything in common together, but they can band together under one thing. And that advocacy grows and grows fast. So again, if you have a group of members and you have people you can rely on, these are the people that can do these same things and help you in cases where you're going to need that too. Because most of these people are living online. And most of the things that campaigns are watching is that pressure in those communities. If you want to, and this is them. I call this the olive. The green is the amount of activists that are out there. They get a little bit more extreme every time the circle gets smaller, but it's still the same group of people. It's not doubled. The same people that would send out a text or post something on social media, they care about an issue, those are the people in green. The people in yellow are the people that are going to write to their senators. They're going to write to their local community officials. The orange, those are the people that may show up at a protest. They're the people that are going to get a bit more engaged. The red are the people that are going to get a little bit more into protests, rallies, get really far into it. And then really small, you may not even be able to see it, is a little tiny black dot. And those are the people that get violent. And I'm sure that these are people that maybe you've heard of. They show up to farms. They're using drones over your land or property to take videos. They're leaving recording devices. They're the ones that are attacking corporations, restaurants, supply chain issues that are there for your members and people within the community. So these people are the ones that we hear of the most, but they are also a very small fraction of people that you will see. But these are really some of the tactics that these people are using that I've put up here, and they haven't changed very much. You know, people who have felt hardships, they're going to go out. A lot of these people, again, I said, are nonviolent, but they are disruptive. And people who are disruptive, squeaky wheels, right? Get the grease. They're getting more efficient and replicating. You see the same things of people throwing, you know, tomato sauce on famous paintings and art, and they're doing it all around the world, or taping them, or not taping, using glue to tape themselves down to roadways. These are all forms of advocacy. It's just how you choose to use them. One thing that we are watching and we monitor is that a lot of the left really progressive wings and the really right progressive wings are now starting to fold in on themselves and use very similar tactics. And a lot of those centers around your areas. One of the things Burton and I talked about a lot was, you know, there's a big expansion of pipelines that's coming through the Midwest. They're even coming through the Southeast. Carbon capture which at first sounded in vogue, is not in vogue any longer. It got put into the IRA. There's a huge amount of money allocated to carbon capture and storage, and a huge amount of money being allocated to hydrogen hubs. And those are happening all over the country, and they will need the added infrastructure and network to be able to go with them. Now, again, as a bipartisan organization, whether you're for or against it, whether it's something that you believe is not great for your land, I highly encourage you to go talk to your local officials to lobby for you on your behalf, or to be able to have those conversations with these organizations. There's a lot of money being poured into this because of the energy mandates and some of the targets that are going through across the country. So these things will be coming out. One of the biggest issues that we were talking about was carbon capture. So one of the biggest things is a lot of these industrial facilities, which I'm sure you know, especially ethanol. And there's a big issue with being able to capture all of the emissions that are coming out of these facilities, especially in the Midwest. But there's groups out there, Bold Alliance, and Bold Nebraska are two of them. And they've gone in with specific landowners in various areas and said they're going to use eminent domain, whether they know it or not, whether they think they're going to use it or not. And it's enough to scare people. It's enough to scare you for your livelihood. It's enough to scare you for what you have on plans for business. But also, if you're a corn farmer in the middle of Nebraska and you've just got told to go against it, where is the ethanol producer going to be able to get stock? So, these are things to think about. When we talk about energy development with oil and gas and them co-opting a lot of the tankers to be able to move that energy across, but not leaving enough rail cars to transport grain and other materials, that's not great either. So these are all conversations that make things expensive. We know there's going to be a food shortage. We know there's diesel issues, fertilizer issues, all of these things. And we're out talking about these each and every day as Consumer Energy Alliance. We're looking at these things as issues to be able to deal with, and these are things we would love to partner with you on. There's a lot of money going into advocacy, especially opposition advocacy, whether that is for or against energy or for or against the agricultural process. As you can see up here, the top 15 anti-energy organizations in the country, two of them we weren't able to pull their 990s on, but close to $1 billion in revenue. That's revenue. These are people giving every day to a business of opposing and advocating against energy, and by the process, mostly because of all the land out there, y'all. So this is the kind of funding that's going into it. If you go down one more, this is the political spending. You can see just in PAC and candidate funding for some of these top groups, over $55 million to campaign advocacy, and that's just 18 of them. So this gets really heavy. It's a heavy lift on advocacy if you're not out sharing your word, if you're not out there already talking, if you're not out there with your voice. So one of the things that we continue to do through these various campaigns that we have across the country is to really go out and continue, what does it mean? What does it mean to have a windmill on your land? What does it mean to have solar on your land? What does it mean to have a pipeline go through there? Who are the people on the other side? What does construction look like? So what we're doing is educating so that people understand what those issues are. And the reason that I would highly emphasize getting out there and disrupting the conversation and being your own advocate is because if you're not out there advocating for yourself, a third party is going to do it for you. The media is going to do it for you, or an opposition group is going to do it for you. And whatever they say first and get out on the board with, it's really hard to come back. It's really hard to explain the opposite way. So I would say, if there are groups that understand you, that you can team up with, that know the issues that you're facing, that know the things that are going on in your communities, I would highly, highly suggest finding something to rally those people around to make sure that they can speak out not only for you all, but for themselves, because it's pretty dirty out there, and there's something happening every day. And these are really the things that are helpful, and you don't need to fill the circular file with a lot of trash to make it happen. But reaching out and creating a groundswell and having people understand the issues and things that you're working on every day are very important. So as advocacy becomes front and center, as communications continues to leap over some of the work being done in the public arena, as far as the legislative side and lobbying, I would really encourage you to find ways to incorporate both your legislative action, policy action, with your communications to really blend them together moving forward. Any questions? Yeah.
How likely is it that a group like yours would partner with an organization like ours that may not have the direct contact information or demographic information of individual members, but has contact with the Granges that those members belong to?
We partner with a lot of people, and it happens a lot. And I think that sometimes you find interesting bedfellows, right? You find, especially with the latest issue with sustainable aviation fuel. And now all of a sudden you didn't realize, but one of your best friends could be United. You know, there's things that are happening all the time, and I think it's really hard to get people excited. You saw that little olive, right? There's only so many people out there that are willing to stand up, and especially in such a divisive political climate, people are scared to say their minds. They're afraid to speak out and say what they want without fear of retribution. So it's really important for people who want to do advocacy to get the groups together, because together you can gather more people. So where some people might have a list that you may not be able to use, another group may be better at coordinating for media or social media. Another group may be better at leveraging media and going out. Another group may be better at being able to get people who are within their community. So as an example, if the Grange really wanted to reach out to their local members, but maybe didn't have the means to get some of the information behind development or what it means or how construction happens or some of these issues, that's where organizations like ours team up with organizations like yours to really focus on those issues, find thoughtful ways to be out within the communities and share kind of both of our strengths.
Emily, you might also tell them about your state network, your representatives out there, these folks can get in touch with.
Yeah, so we have about 20 people on the ground. We're all across the country. Mostly, we don't really exist along the Green Wall, which I refer to as Washington down through California. But we represent people in the Southwest, Midwest, Rocky Mountain region, the Southeast, Mid-Atlantic and the Northeast, with offices all over, with people who are specialized just for those areas, who understand the politics on the ground, who've been out with the people, who've been to local Rotary meetings, who've been out in cafes and had those conversations, who understand the issues on the ground. So we all work together to be able to understand what those dynamic issues are and be able to create built-for-purpose campaigns and coordination so that it really talks to the issue within those local communities. Yeah.
You mentioned the idea of eminent domain in propagating green biofuel and ethanol production facilities. Does the CPA interface directly with biofuel producers? Do you collaborate in that part?
We talk to any person who is energy consuming, which is all. And, you know, sometimes it benefits them and sometimes it's not. I think one of the things that we try and focus on is there's a lot of misinformation where people will say, oh, they're coming in with eminent domain, that maybe they're not, and the organization isn't even considering it. But if it's out there, right, somebody's going to advocate on it. And if you don't talk first, somebody will. And a lot of times companies don't talk for themselves. You know, we really try and understand the local communities. So those are things that we will go out and we'll contact those organizations. What are you doing? What are your plans? Make sure the policymakers in those communities are equipped to ask those questions. So when they go into those meetings, do they know what the process is so that they can ask the right things so people within those communities don't get left behind?
Thank you.
Yep.
Maybe one more. She's got a plane to catch and you've got a session to get to in a few minutes. One last question?
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for having me. Enjoy the rest of your conference. Thank you so much.
I got a good gift for you.